Hey, this is Arjun, and I'm the CEO of doola.com. Doola is a venture-backed startup that has successfully raised over $13 million from the likes of Y Combinator, HubSpot Ventures, Nexus Venture Partners, Cody Sanchez, Graham Stephan, Sahil Bloom, just to name a few. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand Wyoming LLC taxation as a non-US resident. The way we're going to break this down is in a few key sections. First, we're going to start by understanding the importance of taxation for a foreign-owned Wyoming LLC. Next, we're going to dive into understanding how does LLC taxation in Wyoming work for non-US residents. We're going to define what it means to be engaged in trade or business in the US, also known as ETBUS. We're going to run through foreign-sourced income versus US-sourced income. We'll then dive into how tax treaties can help your Wyoming LLC as a non-US resident. We'll finish up with how to actually file taxes for your foreign-owned Wyoming LLC, and then how to create a Wyoming LLC. Let's dive in. If you are planning to start a US LLC, Wyoming offers significant advantages, from privacy protection to favorable tax treatment. Now, if you're a non-US resident with a Wyoming LLC, you won't be taxed on foreign income. In fact, Wyoming consistently ranks in the top states to form an LLC with low tax rates, including no state income tax and no franchise tax. Wyoming's sales tax is also lower than the average. Let's start by diving into the importance of taxation for foreign-owned Wyoming LLCs. The advantages and benefits of setting up an LLC in Wyoming as a non-US resident are diverse, from privacy protection to low filing fees. Wyoming is one of the best states to form an LLC in. If protecting your identity is important, Wyoming is one of the few anonymous LLC states. That means Wyoming allows an LLC owner to remain anonymous on the public record. Additionally, Wyoming actually offers favorable tax treatment. Even for US residents, Wyoming has no income or franchise tax. Sales tax is also lower than the national average at just 4%. Moreover, you'll only have to pay $60 as your annual reporting fee to keep your maintenance costs very low for your LLC. Finally, you won't have to pay taxes on foreign income. For US-sourced income, you'll have to pay a flat income tax of 30% directly to the IRS, but for foreign-based income or foreign-sourced income, you do not have to pay taxes on that. Now let's jump into how does LLC taxation in Wyoming work for non-US residents, and we'll explain more about the US-sourced versus non-US or foreign-sourced income soon. Wyoming LLC taxation for non-US residents is actually pretty simple. First, there's no state tax, and you only need to pay that annual registration fee of $60. Then, your federal tax liability depends on whether your business is considered an active business and if you're engaged in what's called trade or business in the US, also known as ETBUS. To qualify as ETBUS, you'll need to have at least one dependent agent in the US, and that dependent agent must do something substantial to further your US business. If your country of residence has a tax treaty with the US, tax treatment may vary. In many cases, you're only subject to tax if the company is ETBUS and you operate in the US through a permanent establishment. Simply put, if the people who run your business are in the US, you'll be subject to income tax. To file this tax with the IRS, you'll need an EIN or employer identification number for the LLC. A foreign person who owns a single member LLC must file Form 5472 and Form 1120. In the case of a foreign-owned multi-member LLC, it must file an international partnership return, Form 1065, and issue K-1s to each LLC member. In addition, each LLC member is responsible for filing a U.S. income tax return. However, it's worth checking with a tax professional or CPA to ensure compliance and correct filings. Engaged in trade or business in the US, that's what ETBUS stands for. Those types of companies that are engaged in trade or business, again, the abbreviation is ETBUS, I've said that a few times, are companies that, according to the IRS, have at least one dependent agent in the US. That dependent agent must do something substantial to further your US business and not just something administrative or ministerial. This is important for the taxation of your Wyoming LLC, as Wyoming doesn't have any state tax. So the only tax liability will be a federal tax if the company is ETBUS. Next up, let's jump into foreign-sourced income versus US-sourced income. Foreign income is income earned outside the United States. US sources of income require reporting and are taxed at a flat rate of 30% at the federal level to the IRS, or the Internal Revenue Service. You must file taxes at the end of the year on a form called Form 1040-NR. However, there are exceptions to this. For example, inventory produced and sold outside the US is considered foreign income, but a song you produce while living in Portugal is still considered US income if the royalties come from US sales. The IRS offers a comprehensive list of the sources of income. Here's what to consider, and we have this broken down in a table that you can check out. You can check it out here, or you can check it out in our blog as well. You could potentially qualify for the following things. Next up, let's jump into how to file taxes for your foreign-owned Wyoming LLC. Once you have identified your income source and your individual taxpayer identification number, or your ITIN, which might be required for certain types of filings, You can then proceed with the following steps to file taxes for your foreign-owned Wyoming LLC. First, you need to gather the necessary documents. Necessary documents to file taxes for your LLC include income statements, expense records, and any other documentation. You can consult a CPA or tax professional to ensure you have all documentation. Decide on your tax classification. As a non-US resident, your Wyoming LLC can be treated as a disregarded entity, a partnership, or a corporation for tax purposes. There are pros and cons to each, and which taxation structure you elect depends on the size of your business, type of business, and business goals. Fill out the appropriate tax forms is the next step. Filing taxes for a Wyoming LLC may require one or more of the following, depending on whether you elect to be taxed as a pass-through entity, as a foreign partner within an LLC, or as a corporation. Check out this table which breaks down the different types of filings and what they're called. If you want to see exact links to the filings, you can check that out in our blog post link below. Next up is paying any required taxes. If you owe taxes to the US government, make sure to pay them by the deadline. Filing dates vary based on whether you elect to be taxed as a corporation or as a pass-through entity. For partnerships, multi-entity LLCs, and S corporations, the filing date is March 15th for filing 1065 and 1120S returns with Schedule K1s. For C corporations, Form 1120 is due on April 15th of the following year. Learn more about tax filing requirements for your US company in our blog post, where again, we'll link to the specific filings, the names of the filings, and you can check them out on the IRS website too. Next, let's jump into actually creating a Wyoming LLC for a non-US resident. First, why should you form a Wyoming LLC? We mentioned some of the benefits earlier, but LLCs for non-US residents offer tremendous benefits if you plan to operate a business in the US. We have a full post and video on Wyoming LLC pros and cons, which you can check out. And then if you're actually ready to form a Wyoming LLC, you're in the right place, and doola can absolutely help. Not only do we offer Wyoming entity formation, but we offer fast and professional formation services in all 50 states, and we'll help you get an EIN and a bank account. Last but not least, I'm going to run through some of the most frequently asked questions we get when it comes to Wyoming taxation for foreign founders with a Wyoming LLC. Do non-US residents need to file personal income tax returns in the US if they own a Wyoming LLC? The answer here is if you own a foreign LLC and you are not engaged in US trade or business, remember ETBUS, as defined by the IRS, you are not required to file 1040-NR or pay personal income taxes. However, you can check with a CPA or tax professional to understand your individual tax obligations. What taxes do non-US residents need to pay for their Wyoming LLC? Non-US residents do not need to pay taxes to Wyoming. However, Wyoming LLCs are taxed on any US sourced income at 30% paid to the IRS. Are non-US residents eligible for any tax benefits or exemptions? You generally cannot claim any tax benefits or exemptions. However, if you do business in the US, the LLC may qualify for tax benefits, credits, or exemptions. Likewise, if your country of residence has a tax treaty with the US, you might qualify for an exemption. Are there any withholding requirements for non-US residents operating Wyoming LLC? Wyoming does not have a personal or corporate income tax. However, a Wyoming LLC is responsible for paying federal tax at 30%. How can non-US residents ensure compliance with Wyoming LLC tax obligations? Non-US residents can ensure compliance with tax obligations by working with a tax professional or CPA. You must obtain an EIN for your non-US resident business to file taxes. That's a wrap. I hope by the end of this video you now understand, or at least have a primer on taxation for non-US founders with a Wyoming LLC.